Well, I've got the AC going in the F-250 pretty much near full blast, and it is not putting out any cold air whatsoever. I don't know if you can see that temperature gauge, but it's putting out air close to 100 degrees, probably 90 degrees. So that's just not going to work for the summertime when it arrives. And the reason it's doing that is because the air conditioning compressor is not engaged. You should see this frontal area here with the 3 buttons on it spinning around with the engine if the compressor is running, and it's not. So that's the reason why the air is not getting cold. And 9 times out of 10, that's going to be because the system is low on Freon. And what the system is doing right now is it's protecting itself. It's protecting the compressor from becoming damaged and seizing up due to the low Freon. The Freon gas inside the system actually acts to carry all the lubrication all throughout the system and lubricate the compressor. And if that Freon level dips below a critical value, it won't allow the compressor to run. And I believe on this system, the low pressure cutoff switch is right here on the accumulator. So that switch is probably open right now because there's not enough pressure in here to close it. Kind of like the oil pressure switch on the car. So let me shut this thing down so you guys can hear me and talk a little bit more about it and get things set up and see if I can put a charge on this thing and get the AC back before the summertime hits. Okay, I've almost got everything all set up here. I've got the gauge manifold set, almost hooked up and everything. And I wanted to talk a little bit about how the system works. For those that aren't familiar with HVAC too much, the heart of the system is going to be the compressor. And it's got an electromagnetic clutch here. Here's your air gap right here between the engine-driven pulley and the crankshaft of the compressor, and this is the portion here that actually turns the compressor. And what happens is when you apply 12 volts to the magnetic coil inside the clutch mechanism, it's going to close that gap. It's going to pull in. This is spring loaded. I can push on it. It's going to pull this thing in and make contact with the engine-driven pulley here, and it's going to start turning the compressor. And the fact that it's free is a very good sign. If the compressor was seized, I wouldn't be able to do this. So this is one of the first checks you should do. And then on the back of the compressor, it's kind of combined into one piece. You've got a high side and a low side. The high side is going to usually be your smaller hose going to the condenser, and it's also going to be usually the side that's going to have your tap to monitor your high side pressure. The condenser basically is nothing more than a giant radiator, and what that's doing is it's allowing the compressed liquid here, high temperature compressed, or it's actually compressed gas, to condense inside the condenser here into a liquid out the other side. And by the way, this right here I believe to be the high pressure cutoff switch. If there's a malfunction in the system, it's overcharged, it'll disengage the compressor, and if it's really bad, right down in there, right where my finger is a blow-off valve, and that'll actually open up and let Freon go to the atmosphere or vent to the atmosphere if there's a catastrophic failure. So the compressor is generating heat anytime it's compressing anything. You've got the high temperature, high pressure gas coming out of the compressor, going through the condenser, which goes through the radiator, or condenser several times, and then comes out on the other side, if I can get a good shot of it, right here, to be a low temperature liquid. And this low temperature liquid goes into the some people call it an accumulator, some people call it the receiver dryer. Goes in here, And inside here, at least on a Ford, there's an orifice tube, and it allows a controlled release of that low temperature liquid to expand. And as it does, it expands inside this evaporator. It acts to cool the evaporator. And as a matter of fact, when I start charging the system in this can, from this can, as I release the Freon from the can's going to get a little bit cool to the touch. And then, so it's entering here, going through this receiver dryer or accumulator, it's expanding. It's taking heat away from the passenger compartment. It's cooling down this evaporator coil right here, and it's coming out here. And then it's going right back into the compressor, and the process starts all over again. And I believe this switch here would be the low pressure cutout switch. I think this is the switch right now that's open, that's not allowing the compressor to engage. So what I've got to do is hook up the gauge manifold set and see what's going on. I've got this complete set that monitors the low side and high side as well as the temperature. You always want to look at your temperature and pressure relationship and correlate that to the ambient temperature outside. You could use one of those charging cans. It's just basically a big can with a hose on the end of it and dump Freon in there. They do work, but it's usually better to go ahead and use the complete set to actually measure what you have. And this is a nice one because it has a sight glass. You can see the liquid Freon coming in there and check your flow. It's the way it's designed, it's fairly foolproof. You've got these quick disconnect couplings that look a lot like the couplings that go on the air tools, and you've got a little needle in there that will move outward to compress the Schrader valve when you turn this to close it. And same thing on the low pressure side. And if you notice, these fittings are actually, this one's smaller than the other, so you cannot get them reversed. And that's pretty important. You always want to charge with a gas on the liquid side, the suction side. So we're going to put the low pressure hose on the low pressure fitting here. Then we're going to put the high pressure hose on the high pressure fitting here. And one of the things that you want to do before you do any of this, before you waste any money on Freon, is you want to check the system for evidence of leaks. And they like to leak right around these fittings here, as well as the hoses themselves. Want to make sure they're nice and flexible, they're not hard. And we want to check the suction side too. You can check for leaks because as it tends to leak, you'll see oil residue on the around these crimps. And when you start seeing that, you got to go ahead and replace the hoses. So you want to check here, and also want to check around these switches and the back of the compressor where it bolts up to. If that's all moist looking, then you've got some O-ring failures there you have to address. Another thing you want to do is check the compressor itself, like where it's split into two halves. Right around that seam there's a big O-ring in there. You want to make sure there's no moisture around that. And the front compressor seal, just want to check the front of the compressor and make sure that's all dry. And the same kind of procedure over here on the other side. Want to check the low pressure fittings. It's kind of hard to see, but everything looks pretty dry. Ford uses these quick connect fittings right here that can be prone to failure if you're not careful, but that looks pretty dry. And then lastly, this fitting here looks really dry, so everything looks in really good shape. No moisture around here, and no moisture around that switch. No oil leaking out. And we know that the compressor is can turn freely. So we can go ahead and start connecting up our system. We'll take off the dust caps. And you can hear the reason why this system is losing Freon. It looks like I've got a failing Schrader valve in here. So hopefully you guys can hear that. So I'm hoping that the agitation of that valve, when I put the fitting on here, the act of doing that will help to reseat that Schrader valve, and I won't have to worry too much. And you want to make sure before you put these on that the valve is totally closed. That way you're not going to have gas escaping as you try to, you're not going to have the pressure of the system fighting against you as you put this on. And I might need 2 hands for this. Kind of hard to do while you're holding a camera. And how you can tell is you want that pin in there as far back as you can. That means that the valve is going to be closed. It's not going to try to open up that Schrader valve over there as you connect everything up. And I find it easier to kind of pull that collar out at the same time you put this in. Just kind of makes it a little easier. And just want to double check, make sure it's not backing off or anything. And now we're all connected. We can start opening up our valves. And as I did that, got a little under 50 pounds, probably 40 pounds looks like. And the system, since it's not on, should be in equilibrium, so I should have basically equal pressure on both sides. And it looks like roughly 35 pounds. It's easier to, there's more detail on the low pressure gauge than on the high pressure gauge. So basically there's no work being done here. Everything is in equilibrium. The compressor is not running. So that's actually fairly normal. And the compressor is not going to run because the safety switch is keeping it from doing that. So the compressor doesn't burn up due to lack of lubrication. So what I have to do now is try to dump some Freon in here with the hopes that the pressure that's inside this can is going to be greater than 35 pounds, so I can force some Freon in here just enough to kick on that switch so the compressor will engage, and if it does, you'll see this needle fall way down and this one start to climb up, and it'll actually draw the rest of the Freon from the can into the system. I'm hoping I can get away with that. In order to use these cans, you've got to use one of these can taps, which has a very sharp plunger in the middle of it that's going to puncture the can once you screw this thing on. And these cans are pretty good. You don't have to have the really large, 30-pound containers or anything. Just want to tighten that on good and snug. And one thing I want to do is go ahead and close these valves one more time. Never hurts to be careful. System's under extremely high, well, will be under extremely high pressure, but the fact I've got roughly 35 or 40 pounds means I've lost a lot of Freon. And that's fairly common. These Schrader valves just start to fail over time. And now we can go ahead and hook up our can. These fittings are knurled on the side for good grip, and they have a little O-ring in there. And it just hooks up like that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and double check all the settings and everything, and be right back. Okay, now we have a little bit of a conundrum going on. I've got everything all hooked up correctly and all that. I've got the can tap on, and I've got this fully clockwise to allow pressure from the can to go into my system here. And a good tip, you've got air in this line, and moisture in the system is deadly to the system. So what you want to do as soon as you have pressure coming into your system, you want to crack that a little bit and let some of that gas escape, and then tighten it back down. You just want to use the Freon in the can there to force some of that humid air out of here, so you just have nothing but Freon going in. And then of course here is our low side. So I've got the low side valve open, and I've got this valve all the way open. So I should have pressure coming out of here and going into here and going into the system. And we don't seem to have any. And that's the problem when a system gets this far discharged, is you're kind of in a catch-22 state. There's the compressor is not going to want to turn on because of the low pressure cutoff switch, but the can does not have enough pressure built in to force the Freon, or force enough Freon into the system to get the system to turn on enough to start sucking more out. And that pressure has gone up just a little bit, but not really where it should be. So the only other option we got two choices. The can recommends charging vertical only, which means it's going to go in as a gas, which is just what you want on the low pressure side. Now we do have the option of turning the can upside down and reversing this, basically charging through the discharge port as a liquid, which you always want to do with the engine off and or the compressor not engaged. And the liquid's heavier than the gas, and it should allow enough liquid to force its way in through there and get me past this catch-22 I've got going on. So let me think about what I want to do. Now the other option I have, and it's kind of a dangerous option, is to bypass the low pressure cutoff switch here. Just take off that connector and bridge these two wires together, and that'll allow the compressor to run and start sucking Freon out. That's a little bit dangerous because it's going to run low on oil initially. Don't really want to do that, but let me make up my mind what I want to do next, and we'll see what happens here. Okay, I found the error in my ways. It was acting like I wasn't getting any Freon in here because the sight glass is totally empty, and I bled this line out and didn't have any Freon coming out whatsoever, and that's because I had this tap all the way down still after I punctured the can. So now I've got the gas freely flowing, and the compressor's not being allowed to turn on. I've got the low side valve open and the high side valve closed, and now we'll start to charge. We'll see what happens. I heard the compressor kick on just a little bit. It's going to sit there and do that probably off and on until I reach a certain critical point, and then run continuously. That low pressure cutoff switch is what's doing it to me. What I think I'm going to do to speed things along is go ahead and bypass that and see what I end up with here. Okay, I got the switch bypassed, compressor is on, and we are slowly charging up. I don't know if you guys can see, but this can is getting some frost on it. and it's kind of at a weird state. The pressure cycling, the low pressure switch is cutting in and out and in and out. As the compressor turned on, obviously the pressure decreased on that side, and cut it back off again, it's hard to charge it up. But since it was that close to, yeah, now you can start seeing the frost on here. It's getting cold because that Freon is coming out of here and expanding a little bit as it's going into the system. It's doing the same thing in the evaporator. I got to keep watching my pressure gauges and everything to see what's going on. Come in here and see if I have any. Yeah, it doesn't look like I'm getting any cold air out of there. But I'm basically going to continue on in this fashion and eventually take this bridge out of here and see if I can maintain the pressure. Okay, we're doing pretty good. Still got the switch bypass going on, and it's a little bit cool out here, so I've got the Freon in a vat of somewhat warm water. I'm starting to get some good flow. That pressure was around 10 pounds before, now it's around 40. And we'll come around here and see what our temperature gauge is doing. I'm feeling the evaporator temperature in the engine compartment getting pretty warm. Oh yeah, that is significantly better, much better. I'm starting to get some cooling action now. This system was so discharged, I had to kind of rely on a few tricks just to get this thing going. The compressor is nice and quiet, so it looks like running it bypass like that for a short period of time didn't do any harm. I think the hot water here is doing the trick. It's a slow process. Just kind of have to take it out every now and then and see how heavy it is. That'll gauge how much Freon I'm putting in here. I really should have a Freon scale, but I don't. And one of the things you don't want to do is let this inadvertently tip over and get the liquid in the low side. That would be devastating. So just want to be careful and hold that up. But it's very encouraging that my pressure is pretty much holding steady. It needs to be a little bit higher than that. It should be around 60, 70 pounds, I believe. But I think it's high enough where I can go ahead and take out that bypass and put the pressure switch back in. So I'm going to continue on like this and finish the job and see how cold I can get it. Okay, I'm done charging. At least I've burned up those two cans, and the outlet temperature is could be a little better, might be a little bit cooler. I want to probably try to dump one more can in there and see what I end up with, but it's definitely cooling a lot better. And we now have the compressor turning without the bypass that I have on the low pressure cutoff switch, so it's operating normally. And because we have a complete gauge manifold set, we can monitor our pressures on our high side and low side. And it looks like we're running around 250, about 210 maybe, or actually 260, and right around 40 on the low side. And if we look at our chart here, at about 80 degrees ambient temperature, which is what we have right now, we're a little bit high, although it might be 85 degrees today, I'm not really sure. So we want to have around 40 to 50 on the low side and around 175 to 210 on the high side. I'm a little bit high on the high side actually for some reason, and a little bit low on the low side. I should have probably 50 pounds on low and 200 and something on high. But I'm going to see what happens when I add one more can in here. At least the system is cooling now and running under its own power basically. And I'll be ready to enjoy this thing for the summertime. So I hope this kind of helped you guys out. It was a little bit weird because I was in a catch-22 situation where the pressure cutout switch was working against me, but I think bypassing that temporarily help me get over that hump and get some Freon in this system. I did try to dump a liquid into the high side, but I just wasn't able to get as much in there as I'd like, so that's why I had to go ahead and bypass the low pressure cutout switch. And I'm thinking it's more like 75 or 80 degrees, so I would have had to use the hot water bath to kind of force that Freon on out of the cans. But hopefully that'll help you guys out. A lot of repair shops get really good money to fix these AC systems, and then a lot of them try to convince you that the AC system needs to be reworked and need to have parts replaced and stuff like that. Most of the time, it's really just going to be the fact that you're low on Freon. And I did find a pleasant surprise. I'm going to go ahead and shut this thing down now. Now that it's running well. I always like to turn the blower down low first, and then I turn the system off. That way I don't have all that high current going through the master switch here. Just kind of helps save the, make the switch last a little bit longer. Go ahead and we'll close our valve. That's a little bit hot. Whenever you compress something, you generate heat. So I've got to use this rag here. Pop this off. And I hope you guys can hear that. It's perfectly quiet. The act of pushing in that valve back and forth by the tool here, in combination with now having more pressure behind the valve to force the valve closed, got rid of the leak concern. So I think this should last me a long time. I think the system just bled down naturally over time. These hoses are not 100% airtight, and as this pressure decreased to a critical value, the Schrader valve was not able to hold it anymore and started letting gas escape, so that means the leak started getting worse and worse. But it's nice now that I can take that thing off and not hear any hissing sound, so I think I'm going to be okay with that. So hopefully this will help you guys out trying to get your AC system running for the summer.